Assalamualaikum, my name is Zulkhairi bin Maksud and I would like to share to you about the short term of financing. So what is short-term financing? Short-term financing is arranging of available external funds to meet the needs of a firm for a year or less time. Why do firms need short-term financing? Because cash flow from operation may not be sufficient to keep up with growth-related financing needs. The firm may prefer to borrow now for their inventory or other short-term asset needs rather than wait until they have saved enough. And firm may prefer short-term financing instead of long-term source of financing. Spontaneous source divided into two, which is trade credit and bank financing. Trade credit. It is a credit that a customer gets from supplier of goods. The spontaneous source of financing. In this buying system, firms don't pay immediately. Deferral of payment is a short-term financing called trade credit. Bank financing, bank overdraft, cash credit, purchase and discount of bill, short-term loan, letter of credit. There are two types of trade credit. First, open account. An open account transaction is international trade is a sale where the goods are shipped and delivered before payment is due, which is typically in 30, 60 or 90 days. Obviously, this option is advantageous to the importer in terms of cash flow and cost, but it is consequently a risky option for an exporter. Second, note payable. A note payable is a written promissory note. Under this agreement, a borrower obtains a specific amount of money for a lender and promises to pay it back with interest and a predetermined time period. Bank financing. Banking refers to the process in which a bank wishes a commercial or government institution offer financial service that include lending money, collection of deposits, issues of currency and debit cards, and transaction processing. That's all from me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Haifanuddin binti Abdullah. So today I'm going to share with you about Private Finance Initiative (PFI). The Private Finance Initiative (PFI) is a method of providing funds for major capital investment where private firms are contracted to complete and manage the project. These contracts are typically given to construction firms and last a long time, sometimes up to 30 years. The public services are leased to the public and the government authority make annual payment to the private company. The aim of PFI is to achieve closer partnership between the public and private sector at both central government and local authorities level. So the next one is advantage and disadvantage of PFI. The advantages is benefit of project to owner, strategic partnering, innovation, risk transfer valuation. The disadvantages is high costs are used to tender PFI project. Agreement are brought about through complete negotiation. And the last one is the attitude of government, supportive or otherwise, can easy or complicate the problem. That's all from me. Thank you.
Okay, Assalamualaikum. Right now I'm going to presenting about why should Malaysia choose for the private finance initiative, which is PFI. So Malaysia has implanted many private sectors participation models under its privatization master plan. The results this project are arguably varied. Some of them have been restructured due to their unsustainable financial situation under the private finance initiative framework. The remuneration to the private sector is directly derived from the public sector of the government. Another thing is I would say the advantage is they are delivery on time, which is and on budget, specification defined by the public sector, and the relationship between the public and the private sector, improving the delivery and service, and as well the right that the right of risk are borne by the right party. Okay. For the who will monitor, is basically have three types, which is private sector, quality management system is to measure the availability and the performance. Next is the government, which is reviews and the management system and will increase the monitoring. Next is the users, which is able to report a failure from a private sector and or the government. And for the conclusion, I would say the optimal relationship in the partner between the public and the private sector in driving rational development. Build standards are high, and therefore reducing the risks are higher maintenance costs in the long terms. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Natra. Today I'm going to present what I understand about Private Finance Initiative, PFI. So, government has announced the implementation of project using PFI scheme in order to promote great involvement of private sectors in delivering public services. The principal aim of implementing PFI is to provide an advanced method of public procurement that under appropriate conditions could result in improved savings in quality and better value for money than conventional public procurement. The private sector is responsible for the purest type of PFI contract, such as plan, development, funding, and maintenance of facilities on the basis of the production requirements determined by the public sector. In addition, the public sector does not own the properties but is obliged to make regular payments to private sector companies for the use of their services during the contract duration. In short, the private sector finances and constructs the asset under the PFI program, although it is the government's responsibility to purchase the flow of services over time rather than the capital asset that supports the services. The key goal for the PFI is to be introduced in Malaysia is to revise and improving the execution of the new privatization program. That's all from me. Thank you.
Okay, so Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Alif Haikal bin Oslan, and so I will tell about why Malaysia should optional practical training for private finance initiative. So through PFI we can obtain many things that we can get from this source of financing. So after I read the article and based on my understanding about PFI, PFI will allow the implementation of projects more efficiently and accelerate private sector investment for regional development. Then PFI would allow more efficiency where risk and reward would be shared between the government and the private sector. Okay, then next, the PFI can be utilized in situations where government support can enhance the private sector projects in strategic or promoted areas So we could see that PFI will provide profit for Malaysia financing management. So I think that's all from me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Nura Atira binti Muhammad Hanif. So today video is about my reflection about article why Malaysia should opt for private finance initiative. So private finance initiative is formally defined in 9th Malaysia Plan Report in March 2006 as the transfer to the private sector the responsibility to finance and manage a package of capital investment including management, construction, maintenance and replacement of public sector. From the articles that I have read, Malaysia really have to opt with PFI because Malaysia was developing countries in every sectors. With PFI framework, the government can build a new facilities such as hospital because the government don't have to pay for a long time. PFI payment boosts availability and performance of service that the private sector recovers its return on investment over the life of the concession. PFI brings a lot of advantage. One of them is private sectors are more productivity and dynamically efficient, so it can achieve greater Malaysia economies. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Private finance initiative in Malaysia, which is I have read an article. So Malaysia have implements this kind of PFI in private sector such as telecommunications, in highway making, airport. So the PFI framework is a partnership between the public and private sectors. So the monitoring have 3 levels. First one, the private sector perform systematic monitoring via a quality management system to measure availability and performance. So second one, the government reviews the quality management system with planned and random spot checks. Third one, the government will increase monitoring and repeat fails or poor performance, and the users are able to report failure to either the private sector or the government. So one of the reasons why the private sector should pursue PFI projects. So PFI projects allow the private sector to project and reasonably generate certain cash flows over the long term, which is provide they continue to perform.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Firdaus bin Jabruddin. Today I would like to explain about the article why Malaysia should do a private finance initiative. Okay, first we look at the meaning of a private finance initiative. Okay, the meaning is a responsibility for finding and maintaining the capital expenditure package and service, including the construction, managing, repair, refurbishment, and replacement of a public sector assets. The main objective of a private finance initiative is to promote greater private sector engagement to enhance the delivery of infrastructure and the public service facilities. Malaysia has implemented many different private sector participation models under its privatization master plan, ranging from a full-fledged privatization model in sectors such as telecommunications, power, port, and airports to the build, operate, transfer model. In almost of them entities derives the bulk of their revenue from public users. Under the Private Finance Initiative (PFI) framework, the remuneration to the private sector is directly derived from the public sector of the government and less than public users themselves. Under the PFI frame project, payment is made in whole only when the assets are available. Payment made under different payment schemes are usually not subject to the same rigorous test. This means for that latter, the government will likely be obligated to continue paying even though the asset is not available or services are not in proper order. Some of the different payment arrangements are, in a principle, vendor financing are generally have a short tenure. For example, 8 to 50 years, then the concession period, uh, such as 25 to 30 years. The use of private finance in project will add greater accountability. The scrutiny of the private sector performed by the lender. The lender also play an important role in filtering the performance from the non-performance, and increased private financing will help to develop the local debt capital market. Different private entities thrive on delivering different innovation solution to give a set of specification. In addition, many will have a different risk appetite, and this factor may ultimately affect whether the government is getting the best value for money for the project. It is not uncommon in a project to find a significant price difference between a different private sector tender. So for me, PFI is very good to measure, but we need to control when using it.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Fatihi Atifi bin Muhammad Anwar. In today's video, I would like to talk or explain what I understand about the article that been given by Sir last week in online class.
The title for the article is Why Malaysia Should OPT for Private Finance Initiative, or we can say as PFI. The words OPT in the titles means choose or decide. Based on the title, what I understand is the title asks why Malaysia should choose for private finance initiative. I think the PFI is a plan that made by the government to help to establish the finance of our country. From what have I understand from the article is the PFI have its own advantages and disadvantages to people. And for the advantages is, first, it can increase our finance, and the second one is we can get the guide from the government, and the last one is it can reduce the risk transfer between the public and the private sector. And lastly, the disadvantages is,
First, it takes a long time to success, and the second one is it needs a high cost in the PFI, such as to negotiate between the two sectors, such as public and the private sector. That's all that I understand from the article. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. My name is Mama Amir Faiz. So here is my opinion. The concept of a private finance initiative has been internationally implemented over the last 2 decades. In Malaysia, even though the involvement of the private sector in assisting with the provision of public services and facility is not new, only recently under the NINT Malaysia plan to government has officially announced the implementation of project using PFI scheme in order to promote greater involvement of the private sector in delivering public services. So here are the PFI framework monitoring occurs. The private sector performs systematic monitoring via quality management systems to measure availability and performance. The government reviews the quality management system with planned and random spot checks. The government will increase monitoring on repeated failure or pure performance. And lastly, the user are able to report failure to either the private sector or the government. That's all for me. Thank you.
From the article, we know that private finance is a way of financing public sector projects through the private sector. PFIs elevate the government and taxpayer of the immediate burden of coming up with the capital for these projects. Malaysia implemented it through Project Highway, Telecommunication, Port and many more. PFI can measure the performance of the private sector that government pay. The benefit of PFI should exceed the increased cost of private financing. Public infrastructure spending is one of the biggest government expenditures and represents significant opportunities for the private sector. PFI projects are also allow the private sector to project and reasonable generate certain cash flow over the long term. In addition to the local market, many countries have started adopting the PFI framework, and this will present greater opportunities for Malaysian-based companies to develop their skill set and track record to participate in foreign markets. Despite being a newcomer in PFI, Malaysia with its rich experience in privatization has much to gain from PFI. What we need are genuine partnerships to marry public sector requirements and private sector expertise in delivering world-class services and clear procurement framework that will bring projects to fruition quickly and efficiently. That's for me, Sharif from AS247 3A. That's it. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nur Aini Shifa bin Amzah. What is PFI? Okay, PFI is Private Finance Initiative. Private Finance Initiative that is expertise private sector, design, build, financing and operating, limited risk transfer between the government, and then government policies and finding public infrastructure project with private capital. The monitor first is private sector quality management system to measure availability and performance. Second is government review the quality management system, will increase monitoring. 3 is user able to report a failure from private sector or the government. Advantage of PFI: first is delivered on time and on budget. Second is a specification defined by the public sector. Third is relationship between public and private sector. Fourth is that the right risks are borne by the right party. Fifth is improving public delivery and service. Principal PFI Purchase service not asset, value for money to public sector, project risk management between public and private sector, utilizing and incorporating private sector know-how to expertise, incorporating whole life cycle, costing in infrastructure project. For the conclusion, first, optimal relationship in the partnership between the public and private sector in driving national development. Second is build standards are high and therefore reducing the risk of higher maintenance costs in the long term. That's all from me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Irsalina Chaza from AS2473A. So today I'm going to talk about why Malaysia should opt for private finance initiative, which is PFI. So PFI is Private Finance Initiative. Under the Private Finance Initiative framework, the remuneration to the private sector is directly derived from the public sector or the government and less from public users themselves. This creates greater certainty in cash flows and thereby achieving greater financial viability. With these benefits, PFI is widely praised. The PFI framework is, after all, a partnership between the public and private sectors. Monitoring occurs at three levels, which is the private sector performs systematic monitoring via a quality management system to measure availability and performance. The second one is the government reviews the quality management system with planned and random spot checks. The government will increase monitoring on repeated failures or per performance. And the last one, the users are able to report failures to either the private sector or the government. So the next one is the benefits of PFI. PFI projects also allow the private sector to project and reasonably generate certain cash flows over the long term. The greater opportunities for Malaysian-based companies to develop their skill sets and track record to participate in foreign markets. And the last one, there are also opportunity for a secondary market for PFI equity with shares in successful PFI projects, proving to be valuable to investors interested in established PFI projects. So the conclusion is, despite being a newcomer in PFI, Malaysia, with its rich experience in privatization, has much to gain from PFI. What we need are genuine partnerships to marry public sector's requirement and private sector expertise in delivering world-class service and a clear procurement framework that will bring project to fruition quickly and efficiently. Thank you.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Kiranas. Today I am going to discuss about this article. So what is PFI? PFI is a private finance initiative. So we take a look at the first point. PFI payments linked to the performance measurements. It is also important to note that while the government is paying the private sector directly for the services rendered, these payments are linked to a performance measurements and hence should not be regarded as guarantees, subsidies or grants. So who will monitor this PFI? The first one is the private sector, second one is the government, and the third is the users. So the next point is measuring value for money. As mentioned earlier, PFI projects should only go ahead if there is a clear demonstration of value for money. This means that on the whole, the benefits of PFI should exceed the increased cost of private financing. So why the private sector should pursue PFI projects? Public infrastructure spending is one of the biggest government expenditure and represents significant opportunities for the private sector. PFI project also allow the private sector to project and reasonably generate certain cash flow over the long term. So that's all. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum, and my name is Nazar bin Chosmadi. So today I would like to share with you guys what is my reflection on this article. From this article, I can learn what is Private Finance Initiative, PFI, or in Malay it's called Inisiatif Kewangan Swasta. So from this article, I learned what is Private Finance Initiative is a way of financing public sector project through the private sector. PFI also alleviate the government and taxpayer of the immediate burden of coming up with the capital for this project. So what I can understand from this article, PFI give a lot of benefit to netizens, to our country. For example, most of the project is about infrastructure project that give benefit to public sector, which is highway, roadway, transport projects such as railroad, airport, bridge and tunnels and many more. So you see PFI framework, there have 3 levels. First one is performance. There we'll see the performance. Second, the government will review the quality, like makes a random spot check. And lastly, monitoring repeatedly. They will monitor repeatedly to make sure the project went smoothly. And lastly, the government or the public sector will make sure the monitoring system tak akan meningkatkan kadar pembayaran tender. That's all. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Hazil Krabi Sulaiman. I am from AS46738A. Today I want to talk about private finance initiative. So, Malaysia has implemented many different private sector participation models under its privatisation master plan, ranging from full-fledged privatization model in sector such as telecommunication, power, port and airport to the PFI framework. Payment is made in world only when the assets are available and the services are performed satisfactorily. Payment made under the deferred payment scheme are usually not subject to the same rigorous test. This means that for the latter, the government will likely to obligate to continue paying even though the asset is not available or services are not in proper order. Different private sector entities that drive on delivering different innovation solution to a given set of specification. In addition, many will have different risk appetites, and this factor may ultimately affect whether the government is getting the best value for money for the project. Despite being a newcomer in PFI, Malaysia, with its rich experience in privatization, has much to gain from PFI. What we need a genuine partnership to marry a public sector requirement and private sector appetite in delivering world-class services and a clear procurement framework that will bring project to the fusion quickly and efficiently.
Assalamualaikum and very good morning. My name is Nurul Filza. I'm going to explain about PFI. PFI is a private finance initiative. It is established to encourage the private sector participation in the local development projects and to reduce government expenditures in providing public infrastructure and services. Under PFI framework, the remuneration to the private sector is directly derived from the government and less from the public user themselves. It is also create greater cash inflow and directly can achieve greater financial viability. With this benefit, we believe that PFI program is suitable for the project that commercial viability of the borderline, especially there is no grant or subsidy from government. The payment to the private sector may be deducted if their services are not good and are not an agreement. Their service will be monitored in a few levels, such as a random spot check from the government on the spot check. It also can be the user will be able to report the bad service that be performed. This program will add greater accountability and scrutiny of the private sector's performance. By it is also increased private finance will help to develop the local debt capital market. Why the private sector should pursue PFI projects? The program will present greater opportunities for Malaysia-based companies to develop their skills. There are also opportunities for a secondary market for PFI equity. That's all. Thank you.